I'm not that type of bird that'll accept that.
That bird.
I'm sorry, bi-weekly as a traveler, like I don't see the full like perk to that. What I love about being what I love about being a traveler is every Friday, whether it's a good week, it's a bad week, it's a F this ish, I'm quitting week. Friday comes, you're like, oh yeah. This is what I'm here for. I want that Friday reassurance each and every week. And then when you go back to bi-weekly, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm broke.
And you gotta wait 2 weeks.
And the thing is, you're not even broke. It's almost like the same amount of money. I do explain that to people. Some assignments, depending on the season and depending on the company, you do get paid, let's say, more than the nurses. Let's say you might get paid double what they're getting paid. But quite often, the way it's split, you're kind of, depending on the state, getting the same exact amount of money the staff nurses are getting, except it's split in half.
So, I mean, how did you get started like with travel nursing? Or actually, why did you want to become a travel nurse?
So I was on a unit. It was a women's surgical unit and, still aligned with L&D. So that's when I left my cardiac step down job. I was like, you know what? I want to try to get back into L&D. And lo and behold, there really wasn't any L&D positions where I was, like not at all. Those nurses didn't leave. I think now there's more availability. Yeah, because they're retired now. But this is what, back in 2013, 2014. I was maybe like 2 years, 2.5 years. I left, went to a women's surgical unit because I was told it would be a part of the mother baby division. And I was super excited. My goal was I'll stay a year and see if I can get into L&D. I think halfway in my first year, the CNO came in and said, hey, we're going to be switching this unit from women's surgical to women's med surge. That was the beginning of, I may not stay here forever, actually. And then from there, all the nurses that had 10 years under their belt, been on the unit forever, they started leaving. And so by my second year on that unit, so I was approaching like 3.5 years as a nurse, I became one of the most experienced nurses on my unit. And we lost so many nurses, so many experienced nurses. We started getting the med surge overflows, and there's nothing wrong with them. It's just the reality of it ends up being more work for you and it becomes more chaotic. And we weren't getting our surgical patients. And so by then, I think I had like some different life changes that were happening. By the time the unit just became crazy and I realized I would show up to work every day like, why am I here? What am I doing here? I could tell I was getting like burnt out. Nothing was feeding me. It's like every single day you were just dealing with angry patients that are in pain, doctors that just don't care. You find yourself seeing the same, patients over and over. You're like, you're telling me last time they just discharged you just because of A, B, and C. And I'm just like, I'm the nurse that discharged you last time and none of that ish happened. Like they don't even remember you because they're always in and out of the hospital.
Yeah. And I just live at the hospital.
They live at the hospital, literally, and they come in with their suitcase. Like I literally had patients that came in with their suitcase, and this is women. So this is a women's unit. And it just dawned on me. I had to speak to myself. I said, Tahina, if you don't feel like you're here, you're tired of seeing the same people, you're not being fed, let's just quit. And I wanted to just quit. And then I think a few people were like, no, Tahina, don't quit. You don't want to burn your bridges. Don't quit. I tried because every day I wanted to just take my badge and shove it underneath the manager's door. Oh, and we also, I think one of our managers retired. We got an interim manager, then a new manager, a lot of changes. Fast forward, I quit. What I do recall after I quit, I resigned. I politely resigned.
Okay, I was going to ask you, did you throw your badge? Or
no. I resigned and put my badge with it. No. But they knew it was coming. I gave them I feel like I gave them a month or I finished out the scheduling period. But I resigned professionally, had my exit interview, all that stuff. But when I resigned, I still remember I got the notification from Sally Mae. It was still Sally Mae at the time. Yeah. And I was just like, oh yeah, they are like, getting auto paid. Oh yeah, like I do need money. And And then I remembered that I had met a travel nurse and she was telling me about it. And then I was just like, you know what? I did contact that guy a few months ago. I reached out to him on a Monday. Friday, I already had an assignment. And the following week, I started my first travel assignment.
Wow,
And
that was good.
I loved it. It was quick, very quick. And it's
Wow.
just because I had to do my profile, get the, I had to do all that extra onboarding stuff.
Mhm.
But it was very quick. Like by Monday, I started the process. By Friday, I already signed the contract. And I do always recommend, if you can, wait at least 24 hours to sign a contract, not the same day. They're like, oh, if you hurry up and sign this, oh no, you need to sign it today. Like, no, you are entitled to wait at least 24 hours to read through the contract and see if there's anything that you'd like to change or add or whatever that is.
So did you know how to negotiate with the pay? Like beforehand, did she like give you a heads up, or did you just sign anything?
So I looked at, because the amount looks good because it's weekly.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then in hindsight, when I found out so-and-so was making $400 take home more than me, I was like, and what company are you with? She was with a different company. She was getting more hourly. And that's when I wisened up. That's when I started researching more and asking more questions. So every company pays different. They are starting to be a little bit more uniformed, but I didn't know about taxable. So I want to say my first assignment, I think I was getting like, the minute I say this, a lot of other nurses will know. $15 an hour was the actual like taxable rate.
Yeah.
But I want to say I was making like 14 something a week, like 14, 1,400 something a week. So I thought that was like great. Yeah. No, that was for the birds, because I found out like that same person next to me, they were getting maybe like 1,800.
Wait, were they a new nurse? Like
no. So I wasn't a new nurse then either. It doesn't matter. It's because he said, "What are you making at your current job?" I was like, do. So he gave me exactly what but weekly.
Wow. All right, so we took a little break. Now we're gonna continue talking about the money. So you said you had something important that people who are doing travel nursing should know when they're negotiating. What was that?
Yes. So with traveling, there's a lot of misperceptions that people think. You'll hear, travel nurses make a lot of money, travel nurses, they have their housings paid. That's not the case. And what a lot of people need to realize, that no matter what your experience is, depending on the agency, depending on the agency and depending on the state you're in, and sometimes it doesn't even matter. Certain agencies are going to offer you a very low taxable amount. So this is where it's like $15 an hour, as I mentioned, when I first started traveling. That was $15 an hour because of the specific company, the agency that I worked for. That's literally the amount of money they'll give to anybody. So that's like whether you've been a nurse for 20 years, you've been a nurse for just 2 years, you've been a nurse for 4 years. Depending on which state you go, they're going to be like $15. They might offer you $16.50. They might offer you $18. That's just what they offer any of their clients. That's different from the non-taxable money. And that's basically what the government has set in place to give travelers. That's like whether it's government travelers, contracting travelers, like anybody who travels in the United States, the company has a certain amount that the government will give to them. And that's for like housing, meals, and daily living. That means the government sees every week I'm just making $405.
Okay.
So the reality of it is the government sees I'm making $405 because it's only $15 an hour for 36 hours a week. But my actual paycheck might be, let's say, $1,500 for this particular contract with this particular agency.
Okay.
Another agency might start off for the same assignment, same hospital, same unit. They might offer their people, let's say, $36. They might offer
the number to be higher, the hourly?
The hourly might be higher, or it might be just about the same. So one company might offer you $15 an hour for the same exact hospital, unit, years of experience, but this company offers you, let's say, $20 an hour. Whereas like another company might be a little bit more lenient to giving you whatever it is you might want. That's taxable. It's kind of like, how much money do you want the government to see you have?
Okay.
Mind you, for this one particular company, I'm realizing they don't go past a certain amount hourly, period. So they might give me $20 an hour, but if I said, hey, can you make me get 35 an hour? They're gonna freak. Like, what? No, we can't do that. We can't. Like, they freak.
Uh-huh.
But you literally go to another agency, they're like, oh yeah, we can give you $35, no problem. But that just means your weekly pay will be less. You're like, yeah, sure, no problem. The reason why I stress this is important is because when you're looking to buy property, a lot of mortgage companies, they're not necessarily familiar with travel nurses and how we get paid. And ultimately, for those bigger loans, they want to see just the facts. And the fact is, what did the government see you make on your W-2s, W-4? And so for this company, I was just making $15 an hour, although I'm making almost $2,000 a week. My W-2, let's say, showed I made $20,000 for the 12 months or however, whatever amount I stayed for that amount. That's all that mortgage company is going to see. So I always stress to people, if you are planning on buying housing, I don't think car companies, like car loans, I don't think they're that nitpicky. But for real loans, like purchasing property, you want to make sure that your W-2 is reflecting what you're actually making for the type of house you want.
Okay.
Low hourly works for most people as taxable, because if you have children, guess what? The government seeing that you're making $20 an hour, you have 2-3 kids, great job, you're getting a lot of refund. My behind is not. Not only am I not really getting necessarily a refund, yeah, it's like those, and I mean, this is what they'll sell to you, like, oh, well, it looks great, but it only looks great depending on what you're filing on your taxes. So if you have dependents, you have a mortgage, those things help you out. But if you are in the process of being single, you don't have dependents, even if you have dependents, depending on what type of house you plan on getting or the mortgage loan you want, you may not qualify. And they're not going to care how many paychecks you show them because they just don't understand it. So if you're buying a mortgage, you want to know how familiar that lender is with travel nurses and the pay. And you also want to make sure that everything will go smoothly with the underwriter. And then what was the next thing? Housing. I think that was the next thing. Yeah. So with housing, everyone seems to have this misconception that, like, don't your agencies pay for housing?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, they pay for housing out of your paycheck.
I think housing.
They pay for housing. And so an example would be, a contract says $2,000 gross. That means, like, by the time they add it up before taxes, it's $2,000. Take home, depending on what you're filing, let's say take home will be $1,800. That's just to keep things simple. So $1,800 is how much is going to be deposited into your account. If you want to take housing, meaning you're going to search for yourself, you'll get that $1,800 in your paycheck. If you want them to find you housing, like, hey, no, you guys can pick housing for me. All right. So your weekly take home is going to be $1,000. Like, wait, what?
That's a big
I mean, that's an exaggeration, but like literally it'll go from like take home is $1,800. You tell them to find you housing and it drops down to like $1,200. You're like, time out. Wait, what? Like, where did that extra money go?
Wow.
To housing. I'm sorry. Did you think the company was gonna let you take $1,800 and pay for it? No. No, but this is what I'm finding out. I call them, the OG nurses. Back in the days when travel nurses weren't, this saturated in the population, nurses would get, $2,000 take home after taxes, plus they'll have housing waiting for them, plus they'll have a rental. The company was actually paying for all of that stuff. That's not relevant in today's world. Now, the flip side, there's some other companies like, Fast Staff. Let me go ahead and just put them out there. Let's say Fast Staff. They're a travel company. They'll pay for your housing, but you work 48 hours. Wow. I'm starting to see some assignments that say 36. I haven't, inquired about any of those, but I did take a 48-hour contract and they paid for my housing. It was an extended stay and it was very convenient. I just didn't feel like doing it, which is what a lot of nurses, they don't want to go through the hassle of doing it. But for me, I'm just like 48 hours contract, I can barely get past the 3 days.
Yeah.
So for me, 4 days as mandatory, that's rough. And so for me, if I see a 48-hour contract, I literally will just, multiply the hourly. I'll do whatever math I do to see what is it for 36 hours. And if that amount is good enough for me, I take it. Because as far as I'm concerned, if there's a week this is because you just never know what type of assignments you have. But if there's an emergency where I can't get into work on that fourth day, I want to know I'm still getting a really good take home just working those 3 days. But sometimes literally it's like, let's say $2,000 for 48. I'm saying low ball prices. Like some assignments have crazy amounts. But let's say $2,000 a week for a 48-hour assignment. If I don't make that fourth day, because it includes overtime after 40 hours, for your $2,000 weekly for 48 hours can literally drop to as low as like 1,100. Like that fourth day makes a difference. And so the companies that pay for housing will make you work 4 days. And I'm just like, is that really paying for housing? Because full-time nurses just work 36 hours.
3 days.
Yeah, like 3 days. Or, if they're Monday through Friday, it's still like 40 hours. So why exactly do I need to work 48 hours? My opinion, and I don't know the validity to this, is because we're working for this free housing. And then I think companies are picking up on nurses now want that high, gross pay or that high take home. And so they're like 48 hours for $3,200 weekly. And it's just like, I guess, it just depends on what your finances are and what your goals are. But sometimes $3,200 for 48 hours in freaking San Francisco just may not be good enough, because now we're in California and just a studio apartment is $2,500.
It's expensive over there.
It is. It's very expensive. So I do look at all those little tricks, but for me, I want 36 hours. I want the opportunity to do overtime if I want, but I personally do not like 48-hour contracts.
Yeah.
And I just always recommend people just take their money. Obviously, people who travel with children, husband, all that stuff, they have their preferences. And if you're traveling alone as a female, sometimes being placed in a good housing facility is good. But other times, if they find you housing, you might still have to commute like 30 minutes to get to your hospital. I'm not a commuter, so I like to look for housing that's nearby so that I can get to work with traffic in like 25 minutes.
Okay, so can they look for housing for you initially, and then if you find something else, you can move into that instead?
Yes. And typically, at least with fast staff, I think you have maybe a week, like 5 days or a week from the start of your contract, to be able to tell them you found your own housing for them to add it onto your paychecks. I think after that week period, then you're just locked into, you're stuck into it. And I know for that company, I think I did an assignment in Pennsylvania. By the time I looked for housing, I looked at the distance, to and from different places. I looked at the traffic. I use Waze, at this time, how good or bad is traffic? Commuting is a big thing to me. I don't like commuting. So I look for convenience for certain things. So for me, I realized if I paid an extended stay for a month, it would have been maybe like $2,200, even when they added their, their deal, when you stay more than 30 days. And I realized that would be about the same thing if the travel company just did housing for me. So that's just what I did. So it was about the same, but that's not the case everywhere.
First of all, how do you find travel agencies and what do you look for?
So for travel, I don't know. I don't think a lot of people actually know this. I think some are catching on. I do try to help my fellow travelers. So with Travel agencies, this literally through talking to other travelers that I met along the way, that I looked into their companies, and there's several. The first one I joined, it was because that particular traveler, she and I are still friends up until this day. She recommended that company to me, and I think they get a, you get a referral bonus. I was like, yeah, girl, I'll help you out. So and so recommended me, so that's how I got started with them. And then I found out about the next travel company I went to because of another nurse that I met, and she was making more. And nowadays they're quick to say, don't discuss pay. We just want that honor system. It's like, no, you just don't want me to know that Boo Boo sitting next to me is making potentially $500 more,
Yeah.
or that I'm making $500 more, and you don't want her to find out.
Uh-huh.
So that's their new trick that I think they're finding out, because the minute you can present that recruiter or that company a pay package anonymously, you don't put the person's name, like, hey, this is what this company is making for the person.
Yeah.
Many times, in order to keep you in that contract, they'll kind of match it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I am looking for travel assignments, I use Facebook for that. There's a few. Let me take a look. So I go to it's like travel nursing on Facebook. When I'm searching, it's like travel nursing, and I'm on the premium job board, crisis rates and emergency needs. I'm also on the 1800 plus gross group. Um, and then I think in order, when you do a strike, you first have to do a strike and show proof. But then I'm also on the NFL as like a strike nurse, because I've done those crisis assignments as well. So I go to Facebook to find my job postings, and it gives me an idea of how hot a certain state and area is, as well as like what's hot for that particular season. So usually crisis rates, which means they'll pay a little bit more crazy than usual. Or let's say the adult population world, you can say the PCU, ICU rate. It's flu season, that like September period until like February, it's hot season.
Yeah.
Now LND, that tends to be more towards the warmer season because people are pushing those babies out.
Yeah.
So this is where certain rates will fluctuate up and down. And it's the same thing for, let's say, a PACU nurse may not make a lot of money depending on a certain season, but then there's another season where, sounds terrible, people are having heart attacks and surgeries all the time. So
Yeah.
it's great for you. Same thing with cath lab. And every state pays differently. And guess what? It's okay if you're not getting paid crazy money if it correlates with your life. So if this is my financial goal, this is what I want to take home, this is what's going to make me happy, et cetera, then go for that. You know what I mean? You don't have to necessarily focus on money. I do know that in the beginning, I've gone to like Rhode Island. That assignment, that was like crazy money. And guess what? I paid for it. It was the most dangerous facility I've ever worked at. I was so stressed. I kept feeling my left eye like flicker. I just thought that's like a nerve thing, until one day I'm like talking to my patient. They're like, why is your left eye twitching like that? I didn't realize that stress flicker was actually visible.
Wow.
To someone else, because by the time I'd like shower and everything like that and be at home, I didn't feel it. So I paid for that money, and honestly, it's like I stayed away from those assignments. Like if the money looks too high, too good to be true, I'm like, some other bird can have that. Like I'm not touching. Like that was my lesson. But this is again in the med surge tele, because I realized as a traveler, you can be step down PCU. You need to make yourself sound like you're almost like ICU to get a true PCU, because the minute they hear telemetry, cardiac, they're going to start molding you, if you're not careful, onto a PCU tele, which kind of seems more like a med surge unit. And there is a difference. But to recruiters, especially the ones that are getting into it to make money, because words around, it's all the same to them. And then be careful to stay within your specialty, because I've picked up a few med surge tele units because the price was right, but then it messes up your resume. Like you start to confuse people. So if you're not yet in a specialty like ICU, L&D, OR, cath lab, those people are good. But if
Yeah.
you are outside of those specialty units, be careful the assignments you go for if you are looking for just that money factor, because after a while you get stuck in it if it's too saturated on your resume.
Let me see. So can your family go with you like to every assignment, or there are some assignments where they're like, okay, you can't bring pets or family?
No, you can go so you can bring family
Mhm.
everywhere, because ultimately it's your housing. They're not coming to work with you. Same thing with
Yeah.
pets. So I've had some people on crisis assignments, or aka, well, there's crisis assignments and then there's strikes and then there's that in between gray world. But let's say for a strike, technically you're there to work every single day, 12-hour shifts up until it's over. You can decide to bring your husband, your fiance, your teenage child, with you. But that just means you pay for the hotel or wherever it is that you're staying. Like,
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with the company as long as you are there to work. So some people rent RVs and they travel in RVs around the country with their family. The dad might be stay at home or something like that, or the husband's the nurse and the wife is stay at home and they travel together. So people do travel with their children. And then some people for the summertime, because school's out, wherever they go, they'll select like Florida. I'm going to be doing a 3-month contract in Florida, and they take their children with them. That way on their days off, they get to explore Orlando and Miami and all that good stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, you don't get benefits, do you?
You do if you want. So if you're taking insurance from your travel company and all the other perks, because you're so faithful to that agency, like, yeah, you take their packages. I at some point prefer to pay out of pocket for private insurance, because if I wanted to be off for a month or 2 months, I think at some point I started taking November and December off, the holiday seasons. I still had my private insurance, because if you don't work for a travel company more than 30 days, it cuts off. And then for me personally, as a traveler, I'm not faithful to anybody, but I will come back to you like nothing's, like time hasn't gone by, because for me, there's a moment where I'm like, all right, quality or quantity. It's like, when I first started, I called myself a gypsy hoe.
Yeah.
But I said no, more professionally. I called myself a gypsy whore.
Or
A whore. And a lot of nurses actually call themselves that, because you're going where the money is. You know what I mean? You're going for the right price.
Because you're doing the same job, like you said. So you just gotta, go with who's gonna pay you more.
Yes. And I do always recommend never give your true desired amount. Add some to it. Or you don't even start discussions about money. You go, what is your highest package?
Yeah.
And if it's something you like, you go, oh, I guess. It's just like, well, what were you looking for? I mean, if it was like $100 more, like, they know how to play it. And they're like, oh, let me see what I can do. And, they'll play with the numbers. Oh, well, guess what? I called the account manager. They're willing to go up $250. It's like, no, you were always able to go up $250.
Yeah.
But if I was willing to take the $250 less, even better. So I always say, do not ask for your bottom number. Sometimes let them talk first and then see how you can finagle.
That's how most people do business, though. You never tell people the exact number. You negotiate.
Yes. And unfortunately, a lot of new nurses, they don't know that. Let's say a southern state, a nurse with 3 years experience, bachelor's, getting paid $20. She's like, I want to go out and start travel nursing. She'll talk to a recruiter. They're like, oh, how much do you make now at your job? And she'll like, oh, $20 an hour. Guess what, honey? That assignment that probably would have been paying you like $35 an hour has become exactly what you're looking for. And you never even know. When you find out when you're sitting next to Sally. I was going to say a different name. When you're sitting next to Sally and she's like, oh yeah, I'm getting this amount. You're like, you're getting $500 more than me a week?
Sally was smarter. She negotiated.
Exactly. Or she knew the process. So I learned some of these tricks from the OG nurses, as I call them. And I made the mistake as well. So I didn't know this when I first set out. I think after my first assignment, I talked to some of the more experienced travelers. This is how I learned. But honestly, they were paying me the same exact money I was technically making bi-weekly at my staff job. And I thought it was just nice because I was getting like half of it every week until I found out like, wow, I could have been getting doubled this amount weekly had I known. So
Yeah.
I'm like, if you make $20 as a staff nurse, go ahead and tell them you're making 25.
Yeah.
Why not? You know
Because
what I mean?
I feel like they could check on it.
No,
They won't know.
they won't know.
Yeah.
They legit will not know.
Yeah. So they're really trying to play you. So you got to try and play them at the
I
same
mean,
time.
it's a business. So I understand it's a business. Everyone's
Yeah.
trying to make money. But I will say this, they're so quick to tell you, oh, we don't get paid from what you're making. Like that's the new thing because they've been getting called out. But in actuality, yes, they do have a certain commission that they make from your assignment the minute you sign. And they're also working. So they too have families and responsibilities. So if the more they can squeeze
Yeah.
in this transaction, they're going to, because how often or how many, recruitees do they actually have? You don't know. So it's like if they can keep milking you to some extent and keep you happy, but
Yeah.
also get something in return, they're going to. It's business. So, oh, my recruiter is so nice, but I just love her. She asks me how I'm doing. How's the money looking like? Okay. Because at the beginning and end of the day, you're the person that's physically working and you need to be happy as well.
Exactly. So how long are your assignments typically?
Typically, the assignments vary. So some assignments, if they're crisis assignments, they might be as short as four weeks. If you're, let's say, in a strike, it might be 7 days. But most standard assignments are 13 weeks, and then you can always extend. So you can either extend 4 more weeks, you can extend for a full 13 weeks. So that means you're there for 6 months. Some people like to extend up until I want to say the 11th month, because then you kind of have to leave that contract and then go someplace else because you can't be considered a resident. So if you stay at one location, you just love it, you may have to leave for like 2-3 months, or I don't know if it's like maybe 2 months or something like that. And then you can come back and continue to do another 11 months if you choose. But typical assignments, typical assignments are 13 weeks.
Okay. And it's just what you negotiate, right?
No, most assignments are 13 weeks. They want those nurses for 3 months.
Okay.
Some companies offer, like for crisis rates, they might tell you sign up for 4 to 8 weeks, sign up for 4 to 12 weeks. But most standard contracts, it's 12 to 13 weeks, period. And then when you get closer to the end of that contract, you're given the option of extending if the hospital wants you to extend. So if a hospital doesn't like you, you won't get a renewal, even if you ask. Other times you can be like, you know what, I really like this assignment. Can you ask if I can extend? They'll tell you yes. Or you might get a no, like we don't need any more travelers for now. And I have seen some contracts off the back, it's like 26 weeks. I don't know how many months that is. I personally, and many of my travel friends, even 13 weeks sometimes feels like way too long.
Yeah.
I always say just sign up for that 13-week period, wait for at least like 4 weeks left, like when you are about to have 4 weeks left, to decide if you want to extend. Don't say, oh, I love this unit and it's only been your first month, I'm gonna ask if I can extend, because guess what, the minute you sign that contract, something like you have to be canceled or you have a crazy family emergency, whatever, for them to let you out of that contract, because ultimately it's money in their pockets and it's money in the hospital pocket as well. So that counts first. So do not sign the contract early on and just wait, because you could be like, I love this assignment, and all of a sudden as the staff gets more used to you, you're like, yo, everyone's changing, because everybody could be on their best behavior for like
when you're new,
when
everyone.
you're new, you know what I mean? And even for you don't start noticing things because you're like, oh, this is pretty cool, okay, this is new, you're kind of finagling, getting used to it. And then by the time that third month hits and you're like, oh my gosh, 3 weeks left, 2 weeks left, 5 days left. Like, you cannot wait. But no, no, no. You jumped the gun and you signed up to do another 3 months, and you
Yeah.
can't get out of it.
So when do you usually re-sign your contract?
I typically, so believe it or not, I'm about to, the contract I'm about to start now, that was the longest place I ever worked.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought I was there for 6 months, and I was there for 9. Yeah, and I love it. So I'm actually returning. I love the people, but in particular, I love that unit.
Mm-hmm.
So I will be returning to them. I didn't think that could ever happen. I did not think that can ever happen. If anything, after a few assignments that I did 13 weeks, I started looking for like 8-week assignments, 10-week assignment. You would not catch me at that 13 mark. So the fact that I'm like returning again, it says a lot about the unit, the hospital, the people, because I'm always friendly. I'm always, optimistic. I'm great with customer service. But if there's too much politics, too much drama, the patient ratio is crazy, no, peacing out.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we love you. Are you going to renew? No. And I just go about my way. No. Like, no. Like,
You
so
don't have to see them again. So that's like
you
the
don't have to see
icing
them
on
again.
top.
You're relieved. So I always finish the first 2 months. And let's say like when I have maybe 5 weeks left,
Uh-huh.
I'll inquire about whether I can renew. And then usually they'll say, oh yeah, they want to, they want you to come on board. But then this is where some recruiters will put pressure on you. Oh, you have to sign today. Like, no,
Yeah.
I'm going to sign in 24 to 48 hours. I'm busy. I'm at work. I'll get to, at least 24 hours max. And then from there, I know I have another 3 months to go.
Yeah. So when do you have to sign the contract? Like, before the
Usually,
assignment ends or after?
oh, the new one, the
Yeah,
renewal,
one.
while
Yeah.
you're still going through it. So the minute they send it to you, ideally they like you to sign it they kind of like you to sign it the minute they send it.
Yeah.
I always make them wait at least until the next day, just in case something like crosses my mind, or I'm like, you know what? I actually don't like it that bad. Or you know what? I see another place I prefer to go to. So I try not to lock myself down in that commitment.
Okay. So you wait till your contract is almost at the very end, and
Yeah.
then
So when I have like 5 to 4 weeks left, then
okay.
I'll sign a contract to renew.
Okay. So I didn't ask you, but as like a travel nurse, did you do an interview? Like, how was the process?
You do. So there's two new things. So there's two different ways of doing interviews.
Mhm.
Um, After you set up your profile and they submit you, if the manager is interested after looking, either it's the company's manager or it's the actual manager of that unit. After they see your resume, either the manager from the actual unit will have a phone interview with you. They'll pose whatever questions they want, and then you answer. And if they like you, you hang up. Then they tell the agency, hey, we do want this person. Then the recruiter calls you and say, hey, you've been given an offer. Or there's a new one where they do a phone recording, and you basically, you log into something, and then, it's like, tell me about yourself. After the tone, you have however many seconds, and then you have to record like your answer. And so apparently that recording goes through a viewing. I don't know if it's the actual unit manager or if it's the agency people that look. Sometimes it's both. So either you're recording your answers on an automated interview, or you're having a direct phone interview with a live person. And then some places even double it up, so you're not only having an interview with the company's manager, but then after that they forward you to the actual unit manager. Does that answer?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So do you have to have like any credentials, like other than like your regular nursing degree, license?
It all depends on your specialty. So if you're a cath lab nurse, whatever it is it's all for any nurse. Any certification works best on your behalf. For certain hospitals, they want just BSN nurses, so you have to have your bachelor's. Some hospitals, they want you to have, let's say, your NISSH, your stroke certification. I used to have it, I let that lapse. But some hospitals, they need you to have that certification. If that hospital does require it, typically your agency will pay for you to get it if you don't already have it. Or if you have it, great. That means that's one check off their box. Everyone needs to have their BLS. Depending on which specialty you're in, you need to have, let's say for any step down PC unit, typically they want you to have your ACLS. So that's your advanced, life support, your advanced CPR certification. If you're in L&D, that's now my new specialty. Ideally, they would like you to have your intermediate and or advanced fetal heart monitoring certification, in addition to like your NRP. And if you're in pediatrics, obviously they'll like you to have PALS. So that's like CPR for the kids and all that other good stuff.
Okay. So like how many years of nursing experience do you need before you can actually become a travel nurse?
Ideally, 18 months, I've heard. Some now specifically want at least 2 years. You might find a few assignments that will take a 1 year experienced nurse. I wouldn't trust that. But I wouldn't trust the 1 year. I've seen a few that's like 1 year experience, but honestly, if that hospital will take you with just 1 year as a nurse, I say run, because
they're desperate.
They're desperate, correct. But most hospitals want a competent nurse, and normally it's like after 2 years, you are strong in your skills, in your critical thinking, and you're more trustworthy, because a lot of people don't realize when you are a travel nurse, you have 3 days max of actual floor orientation. So the first day, you decide whether you want to start off by taking patients or not. I recommend just observing, at least for half of the shift. Like, hey, show me what you typically do. That way, while the nurse is doing, the nurse you're shadowing, while she's doing whatever, questions will pop into your mind and I take notes. So it's like, do what you're doing, take notes. Where can I find this policy? Where do you go for this? What type of teams do you have? Like, those are the questions that I make sure I pose on my first day. Second day, let's say on a med surg unit, if it's like 4, or not med surg, let's say PCU, if the acuity is 4 patients, ratio of 4, I'll pick up 2 patients, because I want to be able to see how to communicate with the physicians, get used to whatever computer system they have there, make sure I have access to everything. And then the third day, I'm taking on the full load, and bam, because the next week you are getting your assignment and you're hitting the floor. Crisis assignments or strikes, your orientation is during the onboarding process, and it's not even in the hospital. It's just kind of like in a stimulation lab, or they're showing you pictures, or they have little stations. And so your first day in uniform on the unit, you are getting a report and you are starting. So you have to figure out where the supplies are. You have to figure it out. So if you are a person that needs their handheld, you're going to be stressed out, because you're a traveler. They're expecting you to be competent. They're expecting you to know. So when you arrive, you need to exude that type of energy. So typically 18 months to 2 years, a travel agency will take you. And I think you'll be okay with it. You'll fumble around the first assignment. But yeah, at least 2 years of experience to be an actual travel nurse. And then you do get an orientation, like a hospital orientation. That might be like a week. But the actual floor orientation, when you're seeing the patients, you're charting, you're getting used to the unit, you have 3 days max. So some hospitals just give you 2 days. Some, you legit might show up and someone shows you something for the first 4 hours, and then they hand you an assignment.
Wow. So have you felt like nervous and like scared, like when you started an assignment before?
I think sometimes I get that little nervous feeling. But that's why on my first day, I typically go, I normally just observe on the first day. So that way I don't feel pressure to know, to think, no, that first day, I just want to I want to observe the unit, the patients. I want to see what they do. I want to get familiar. with the the different IVs, the different just different. I just want to observe on my first day. That's how I control myself. That way when I go home, I review my notes and I'm starting to like visualize like what I'm going to do the next day when I have a patient. So by the third day, I'm fairly comfortable, and by the next week, I'm comfortable.
Yeah, you're comfortable by yourself.